Hi, I'm Alex Catron. I'm the CEO of aiEDU, and we're here today to record one of our first podcasts, not the first, but one of the first podcasts for aiEDU Studios. And with me, I have Zarek Drozda, the CEO of Data Science for Everyone. Zarek's a longtime colleague, friend, and co-creator in the space who's been working to create more opportunities and pathways for kids, specifically in your case, in the field of data science. And I'm really excited to dive in, and I want to hear more about the genesis of, as someone else who's also founded a small but growing nonprofit in the space, what that experience was like, and hopefully we can also nerd out a little bit about artificial intelligence and how data science is a part of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the invitation to join. Just super excited to help trial out AI EDU Studios, and launching a new initiative like this is always super fun. I'm so grateful to be part of one of the guinea pigs.
So Zarek, why don't you tell us about data science for everyone, and if you could just regale us with the story of like how this all came to pass. You're relatively young, and so how did someone like you sort of come to leading what is now, I think, widely recognized as one of the leading orgs, if not the leading org, specifically in the field of data science equity?
Yeah, so Data Science for Everyone, we're a national nonprofit initiative based at the University of Chicago, advancing data science and data literacy around the country. And what we're really trying to do is help teachers and school leaders and even state leaders think about how to modernize the curriculum, and especially modernize some of the core school subjects for the world of changing technology, right? For the world of AI, for the world of big data, for the world of whatever the next emerging technology is going to be. Like that is our core focus. And we've done a lot of work in particular on systems level change, and thinking about how to get the many stakeholders across the full breadth of the education sector to work together, combining research and practice and policy on that really big challenge. In practice, we have a pretty narrow focus, which is on using data science, data literacy as a vehicle to think about broader curriculum modernization. And we work, we're in 29 states now, or at least 29 states now have a data science or data literacy education program, which we're super excited about. That's up from one state in 2019. So we've had huge, fast growth, which we've been really excited about. But it's not depth yet, right? These are like early stage. Majority of the states are pilot programs. It's like 20 or 40 schools. We're not talking all students and all teachers by any means yet. I mean, there's so much more work to do. Genesis to Data Science for Everyone is kind of a fun backstory. And I often give the spiel about it starting from a Freakonomics podcast and we having this viral moment, because I used to work at a center at the university with Steve Levitt, who's the co-author of that podcast and the book series that preceded it. I was in undergrad, and Levitt had this crazy idea. He was like, I've been doing academic research for, I don't know, 20 years, 15 years, probably got the number wrong. And I feel like the impact has been rather minimal. I've written all these books, podcasts, been in economics and in a very applied part of the economics field. And he was like the one real world impact that my work has had was the changing of a very unknown policy in Alaska on drunk walking, because there's a chapter in Freakonomics that relates to the risks of drunk walking and drunk biking as an undercovered issue that actually leads to a lot of traffic incidents. So anyway, he got a resolution introduced. I actually don't think the law even passed, but anyway, so he was like the real world impact of my work is rather limited. I would like to go into social impact and think about how to take the principles and ideas in Freakonomics and apply them to the real world, but for social benefit. So he was putting together the center called Risk, and it was designed as a quasi incubation engine, quasi consulting practice. It was really kind of like a.
Does it stand for something? Risk?
Radical innovation for social change.
Okay, so RISC.
Yeah, RISC. But we stopped using the acronym a while ago because Steve thought it was embarrassing. It's a kind of a corny name. But it was almost like a Y Combinator for nonprofit ideas. It was like a startup incubator for trying to launch and experiment and it tried new solutions on old social challenges using behavioral economics and incentives and data as a vehicle to understand social issues at a deeper level and to unpack maybe hidden issues or challenges, or and in a lot of instances actually applying technology to public sector arenas where there was not great uptake of it. So to give you an example, one of the other projects that the center is working on right now, they're looking into foster care matching and how adopted children can be better matched with foster parents. And the technology and the resources that government agencies and NGOs have to facilitate the matching process is actually quite underdeveloped. Uh, you know, uh, uh, a simple spreadsheet is not very frequently used in some contexts, right? And these are like small nonprofits with like 3 or 5 people each, where just upskilling, capacity training around that type of skill building can be really helpful and can actually make a huge difference. That's one tiny example. I mean, they worked on there was a number of climate projects, criminal justice. We looked at there's a huge project right now in kidney matching. A way to there's an online high school, number of different initiatives. But anyway, DS4E, or this initiative for data science or data literacy education, was a bit of a distraction from that typical set of projects. And it came from Levitt sitting down with his daughter one night while they were doing math homework. And he was like, he looked at the homework that his daughter was doing, and his daughter was in UChicago high school, right? So a great high school. Those kids are going to get into a great college or university someday. The folks who get to go there. He was filling out the homework and trying to tutor his daughter. I think 10th or 11th grade. And he was like, my God, like none of this material relates to anything that I would be teaching my undergraduates, let alone that they would need post graduation. And he was frustrated, and it just felt a lot of the content that was in the existing curriculum did not relate to the real world, did not relate to college preparation. We were just, because we haven't done a serious look at the curriculum in a long time, there have been a lot of tradition and a lot of, at the concept level, and like the how you spend literally class units or weeks hasn't been updated for, the huge emerging toolkit that kids need for a very changing world today. So anyway, that like moment of temporary frustration then led to a Freakonomics podcast, and we got like the David Coleman, who's the CEO of College Board, and 1 or 2 NSF funded projects who were working on introductory experiences for data science or data literacy education, and a few math education researchers together to just have a conversation about this. And that podcast then blew up and got viral, and it made waves in the education community, specifically in math, because I think there were a number of initiatives that were already ongoing under the surface around a greater focus on project-based learning, or trying to look at ways to integrate more technology into the curriculum that were just starting to bubble up. So we really shone a light on some things that were already happening in the field, and we were just able to grow it from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because most people, and I would include aiEDU in this category. Most nonprofits, it takes time to get to a certain caliber of funder, like the Gates Foundations, like these sort of like big institutional funders that generally, just have a level of rigor that small sort of startup nonprofits really struggle to be able to cobble together for those really long and arcane proposals. You all kind of like stormed out of the gate with some like really big, heavy hitting funders. And I mean, I suppose there's part of that is like you were at UChicago, and part of that was having Levitt. But was it? Do you credit that like mostly to just the way that this resonated with people who were paying attention and thinking about math curriculum, and it's sort of like the dots sort of connected really quickly?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it honestly was I think definitely attributable to a huge media splash, right? Like we had the platform of Freakonomics to just have this discussion about. We never expected it to turn into the initiative that it did. Like at that time, it was a total experiment. We didn't have any funding. There was no project plan for it. We put a podcast episode together because we just felt it was an important issue to highlight and to at least try to build some sort of conversation around. The momentum that it generated, we spent a lot of time catching up to the exciting kind of I don't want to call it a firestorm, but the momentum that was generated after that is when we started to get increase the start and then increase the philanthropic support for the project, and we were able to
So they were coming to you.
and we were able to bring in other champions for the issue, right? So like Arnie Duncan was an early colleague of Levitt. They had a existing relationship. Schmidt Futures was an early funder of ours who came in, who was really excited about the initiative to help grow that conversation and then bring it to the next level. Because I think what we started a conversation, we didn't know anything about movement building at the time. And we had to do a lot of learning to figure out how to put an ecosystem together. We spent months like just studying the K-12 system and like literally a year and a half of conversations with state leaders and district leaders and teachers and curriculum developers and assessment folks and just anyone else who represented some lever or part of the system to understand it much more deeply. And then data science for everyone didn't exist as a proper unit until like 2.5 years later or somewhere around there. We didn't start it officially within the university or spin it out into its own unit until like summer 2022. And so the organization is much younger than folks realize. But the general effort, it was almost like a campaign in the early days, has been around the longest.
And how did you, I mean, when you say we, at the time had you graduated yet, or you were still an undergrad?
Oh, no. I graduated. I joined Risk right around the time the podcast came out.
I see. So you were basically employed by Risk. But you're fresh out of college. There's some really heavy hitter researchers and media. The word for like, how would you describe Levitt? He's not a podcaster. He's like a.
He's I guess he's an economist, but he's currently still a professor emeritus at the university.
Okay.
But definitely a bespoke thought leader is maybe a good.
Yeah, So I mean, basically, you were fresh out of undergrad. You were sort of like around these heavy hitters. I mean, really, like Levitt was sort of the OG when we think about podcasting. I mean, I remember when I was in college, like going for runs and listening to Freakonomics before any of this like YouTube stuff had blown up. How did you go from being relatively low on the ladder, which I know that like universities can be very hierarchical, to right now this is like you're running this thing, and it does not feel like you were sort of just hired as sort of like, oh, this is a smart person to like actually get this thing going, but rather, I mean, I feel like from my conversations with you even before 2022, it always, I don't know if I'm over crediting you, but it really felt like this was your baby. Like it felt like this was something that you were driving, and I feel quite confident that if it weren't for you, it might have just sort of like stagnated as sort of like this kind of like side project within UChicago that may or may not have like generated into something with real impact. Whereas now this is like a national organization where you've been to the White House, you've been to basically name the tech or education conference, with any sort of intersection with like education or like data science or computer science, and you generally are there. What did you volunteer yourself? Were you voluntold? Like how did that happen?
Well, I mean, the first thing I have to acknowledge, right, it's super lucky. Like the opportunity set that I had coming out of undergrad was crazy. I think getting this opportunity to join the center that Levitt was putting together around right place, right time was incredible. And I got so much mentorship, so much training. So many people volunteered their time to help me understand the space better and to become a more effective leader. And I'm like so grateful for it.
I sometimes will get young folks, sometimes in college, sometimes in high school, sometimes actually far along in their career, and they have some big idea. And they're really interested in like, how do I start a nonprofit? And I actually struggle to give advice because it's different than starting a company where it's like all you need is a good idea, and then you sort of just go and pitch investors. Like the nonprofit world is like a little bit more esoteric and arcane in terms of like the way you get in front of.
Sure.
It's like much more reputation based. So with the understanding that you were in the right place at the right time, and you had a lot of privilege and opportunity that was sort of laid at your feet because just of the auspices of UChicago. But what were some of the things sort of like as you go back and sort of evaluate what you did right? Can you abstract any advice to sort of like a young upstart social entrepreneur who is interested in doing something like this and just is trying to figure out like, how can I optimize my luck? Like obviously some of it's luck, but some of it's also, manifesting and using that luck to your advantage.
Yeah, great question. And again, so super lucky and grateful for the set of opportunities that we had, and this breakout moment that we had with the podcast and the launch of this. Really, what became a national conversation. What also folks don't know is that we almost killed the project several times after the podcast came out. Because we spent a number of years, number of months at least. Exploring the space, figuring out the way that our team could be helpful, figuring out a way that we could gather the right people, representing teachers and district leaders and administrators, to create a concrete output that actually built on just what was at the time an idea. Advice for starting an initiative like this, I think, persistence is definitely an important one. Like I cannot exaggerate the number of times Levitt came into our office and was like, I just think we should kill the project. Like, there's no we aren't well positioned to help here, or I just don't see any momentum anymore, or the K-12 system is too bureaucratic. It's going to take too long, and we're going to have to talk to too many people and convince too many stakeholders to keep this going. And I think I was always very excited about policy work and in the intersection of economics and data and policy change. And, I think I had a great example from my parents, but also others of the importance of persistence, and that you really just had to go out and talk to people. And I think the one thing that was super important for our work is going to sound cheesy, but a lot of listening, right? Like, we just spent so much time surveying the field and trying to understand what was needed. And we've always had a very intense focus on the problem. And I just came back from our team retreat, and we were talking about how, I think there is a tendency for some nonprofits to build a very boxed or fixed solution to solve a problem, but they might not be capturing something that's systemic in the system, or they might be missing a lever that's in policy, or with teacher capacity, or with a weird bureaucratic red tape at a district that they have to work through. And then if the landscape changes, well, what do you do with that box solution? And we've spent a lot of time in our team doing a lot of strategy work, and come back to it regularly, so that we are always having a very intense focus on solving the problem of, let's call it the curriculum not being up to date, and not having the capacity to teach aligned to new content. And I think having the ability to adapt constantly as we would find new or unearth new challenges was super important. Advice that generalizes to other nonprofit leaders trying to start something, I think, is really hard. Because every context and instance is super different. I'd love to throw the question back to you, and hear a little bit about your origin story and the founding of aiEDU, because I think you built a team from an idea, and at least from my lens, from scratch into something that is really well recognized now. And I think you have so many incredible partners. So I'd also love to hear about your journey and how you all got to where you are today. To make sure this is a two-way street, but and maybe I'll have some better ideas for advice for others.
Well, this is actually not a two-way street. This is not a ploy for us to talk about aiEDU. So I will respectfully decline your kind invitation for me to talk about myself. I will try to draw some connection points, though. So when you, I think persistence is probably, that would be my response as well. Yeah. It's like and then the other piece is, you talk about sort of listening. I think in Silicon Valley parlance, there's sort of this idea of product market fit. And one of the things that you hear a lot from investors is that companies always overestimate their product market fit. They'll come to you and say, "Oh, we have product market fit," and it's no, you have traction, you have some interest, but product market fit is actually really elusive. And so I think maybe the way to abstract that is almost the humility of kind of assuming that you're wrong until you're really sure that you're right. Because if you kind of go into this with this assumption that you know what people need, first of all, you probably are wrong. And then second, people can kind of sense it. And I think especially the work that we do, that our respective organizations do, which is, in many cases, I live in San Francisco, and when we talk about all the travel that you and I do, we're often going to places like I'm going to Austin, I'm going to, Columbus, Ohio, I'm going to, Colorado. Like it's, we're going to places where there's a sensitivity to like these sort of like coastal, experts coming in and like telling us what's right or wrong. And so, and that's maybe unique to the nonprofit space where it's like there's, part of what you are actually building is like trust and reputation, and the like move fast, break things, like use sheer ambition to get what you want. Like
Totally.
that kind of does work in Silicon Valley. Like, and there's a whole separate discussion about whether that's good or not. But there is like a reward structure for like just pushing and fighting and just like being ruthless. I think people sniff that out really quickly, and in my view, that makes the work a lot more rewarding because the people that you're around, yourself included, are just like way more down to earth and like legitimately cool. And when I go to education conferences, zero people are at an education conference because they want to get rich. Like if you're trying to get rich, there's like a very long list of industries. Like I think the HVAC industry is $140 billion, which is bigger than the K-12. The entire K-12 like industry, including curriculum and everything else, is smaller than just like HVACs. And so I think what that produces is a set of people who I think there's still ambition, like no doubt. But it's like ambition oriented towards like helping kids ultimately. And that's a very nice sort of place to be. And so I think just like really leaning into that. And if people feel like legitimately that is what you're trying to do, they will actually give you a lot of grace to get things wrong. Okay,
No,
so
but just to say something more about the authenticity piece, and not moving fast and breaking things. Like I think that is a huge difference between the nonprofit and sector and Silicon Valley, and then especially in education that matters, right? Like there are so many people constantly knocking on the door of school districts saying you should teach this new thing in the curriculum, or I have this great new tech tool that will like change your kids' trajectory. And I think to build legitimacy in the space, and also to just be to have an effective and lasting impact, you need to build something quite sustainably and with a lot of intention and slowly, because the system is so used to the alternative. And I think we recognize that quickly. And it was helpful because when the Freakonomics thing launched, there were definitely, we also got criticism. It was,
tell me about that. What are some of the what were the comments like going into not that you had a comment section, but if you had a comment section, what are some of the things you'd have read?
Yeah, I think, there's always the just like, anything associated with like the Freakonomics brand of kind of POC academia, I think is one, and that was a little bit more standard. And I think we had a lot of folks reach out who had been working in ed reform for a while, who said, here are the mistakes you made, and here are the way that you framed it poorly in that initial discussion. And I literally had a great colleague and friend, Ray Levy, who used to be in leadership at the MAA, which is one of the math associations, reach out, and she helped me put together the website and do all the framing of the issue and think about the layout and how to be most helpful to teachers and researchers in the space, as we were like building our very simple resource hub. And so there were folks who had critiques, but then they came with suggestions and then mentorship, and then we turned it into something, and then it grew, right? And like I think that like very authentic relationship building was so critical for the work that we did. And I think we were always clear about what we brought as an outsider to this sector or to the space, and how we were able to provide some value through looking at it holistically for the first time. And then there were so many people who joined who got excited about trying to build it into something larger. And then the other thing I was going to say is, and I think this is important for like both of our organizations, and I think you all do a great job at this. At the end of the day, like if you are a national education nonprofit, you are a service organization helping a lot of individual schools across the country in an incredibly decentralized system, where the focus is, what am I going to teach on Monday? How am I going to fill my classroom 2 weeks from now? How am I going to get a school bus driver? And I don't like say that any of that to be ingratiating. Like I say that because I think the influence that any of our national teams has on the day-to-day experience of running a school is like so tiny, and the bandwidth to pay attention to like the 20 crazy headlines that are in education news is also so minimal. And I think keeping that spirit is so important, right? That we are servicing the field ultimately.
I mean, I'd love to actually like lean into that, because it's something that I'm like constant. I mean, my parents are both teachers, and so I often just hear, and like most of the folks on our team are educators or former educators, and the stories that like teachers have literal war stories. I mean, my mom, when she was teaching at Firestone High School, when we were actually doing our very first pilot at Firestone, the very first curriculum we built, they had, I think, 2 or 3 incidents of kids bringing guns into school. It wasn't a shooting, but it was still like, you can imagine that's an incredibly destabilizing experience to like have to evacuate a school because somebody's brought a firearm. And so like that's the context that we're trying to like get folks to pay attention to this new thing, which is called AI education. And that is basically the norm, not necessarily guns every day, thankfully, but challenges like of that caliber of like, during COVID, like parents and guardians who were literally dying, and kids who like were like now like having to go and live with their grandparents, like these incredibly challenging, like destabilizing moments that sort of like are going directly, like if you think of like Maslow's hierarchy, like the sort of most basic needs that kids have, and we're coming in with something that is important, but it's it's in context important, but it's not the most important thing for any individual kid. Like if you go systemically, like it's not even the most important thing. It's sort of like on a long list. Bus driving is a great example of that, where like, many superintendents we've talked to, I think there's actually one example. It's funny you mentioned bus drivers, because I think there was one example of a superintendent that attended one of our sessions. We followed up with her, and she was, we gotta, wait, this is wonderful.
I want to make sure we talk about school bus drivers, but I'm also very excited for our third guest.
I don't think Beatrix has any. I don't think she's ever even seen a bus. So her thing is she loves human water. I'll let her have mine. Oh my goodness, I thought cats are not like. I thought they don't like water. She loves water. She'll like literally get into the shower. It's like you have to lock her out of the bathroom. We got CJ's laughing in the background. This superintendent literally was like, yeah, we just had a school bus driver strike, and I'm dealing with that right now. And so it's like, no matter how important you believe AI literacy is, or AI readiness is, you kind of have to get kids into school for any of that to matter. And it's hard because there's nothing that you or I can do to deal with. I mean, we could shift our organizations and sort of like try to figure out sort of like transportation logistics, but that's a whole separate, that's a different organization that we'd have to build. And so I think I don't have an answer to just like, it's really hard. And I think part of it is like not being aware. What I'm hearing from you is like, which I actually going for it.
I'm sorry you lost your water.
Yeah, I can't drink that anymore. Being aware of like that context, so that I think again though, like coming into the conversation as I wonder if we should cut this out. This is kind of cute.
I really hope you don't cut it. I think it adds the unique brand of aiEDU Studios.
We're gonna have. Oh no. That's
okay.
real. That's human water. No. Okay.
This is also my daily experience. I'm not bothered.
Does your cat drink water too?
Yeah.
Really? What is this like whole subculture of cats that are actually into water, and they're like sort of like a counterculture?
Well, so my partner and I have been fostering cats. We did that in Chicago. So we get like a new cat every like 3 to 6 months. I'm always shocked by how distinctive the personalities they have.
Yeah, she's actually like extremely friendly. We took her to the vet. It was on election night. So it's like in the veterinarian's office, and Thomas was, get off your phone. We're like in like the first vet visit, and she was just like having a blast. She was like laying down and rolling over and purring.
That sounds wonderful.
It was not what I expected. Okay, so yes, starting nonprofits is hard. We're doing work in education is hard. I want to talk about data science though, because I think there's something unique about what you are doing that I also see some sort of like echoes in the work at aiEDU, which is um, it's like kind of a simple idea, like a very, very specific intervention, right? Like with more data science education. And you've identified like a really easy way for schools and teachers to start, which is like literally just get started. Like use some introductory curriculum. Like you don't need to completely overhaul your math department just yet. Um, and I wonder, do you feel like there's value in sort of like having like a really, because I think part of the challenge with education is it is so multivariate and complicated or multidimensional rather and complicated that I think people sometimes are just like throw up their arms and they're just like, I can't disintermediate any one specific challenge that I can solve myself, and so it's very demoralizing. Um, I mean, did that have something to do with, I think the success that you had sort of like building these coalitions and sort of getting the traction and the buy-in from what is now a pretty robust set of orgs that are sort of signed on as partners or sort of collaborators?
Yeah. So many thoughts. I think the first advantage that we had is we came in at a time when there had already been research and development on creating data science and data literacy education curriculum materials, prior to us doing the awareness, case making, advocacy, field building, state and district outreach work. There were NSF projects that started as early as 2013, 2015. There were classroom software tools that had been developed. It had not scaled yet, right? They were mostly in pilot stages, but they were, there was already a community scattered around the country working on individual projects in different locations or different domains. I think what was helpful is bringing all those people together in the same space with regularity, and they started to see ways that they could collaborate. So that was the field building piece that was so critical. I think on the specificity of the intervention, that was another very important factor, and I think what has led to some early success and emphasis on the early. Like I know we've talked about this at prior conferences, but our focus was very intensely on, at least at the beginning, on just high school mathematics. Right, it was a very narrow part of the curriculum. We thought it made sense in a particular location in a particular way. We had like 2 or 3.
Where was the first location?
We did a pilot with the Khan Lab School, and that was directly facilitated by our team. But prior to us, there were many pilot projects, district research partnerships. Los Angeles Unified was one of the first schools back in 2015 that started.
That was one of your first.
Yeah, but
the second biggest.
Before we entered the space, right? This was a NSF-funded project that was driven by researchers at UCLA and a few surrounding schools. Who thought that it actually grew out of the computer science education work, and it was a sort of a spur out of that movement. And so these demonstration projects were really critical. There were so many people already working on high quality research and curriculum materials in the space. And then I think the specificity of the intervention mattered a lot. And then we grew from there. So we started with this really specific focus on high school mathematics. Then we had folks come in and say, oh, you should be looking at the science curriculum. We would really benefit from, where data was already like a fundamental part of the scientific process, right? And any lab investigation you would do in school. But how could we dial up the focus on project-based learning and having real world data that you could play with as a student instead of it being fixed in a textbook? Or how could you improve the way that students interact with middle school or high school labs? And then now we're on some really exciting projects where we're looking at we're partnering with NCSS, the National Social Studies Educator Professional Organization, to look about technology ethics in middle and high school. And that'll be an intersection between data and AI and computer science and some of the other emerging technology areas to figure out what does a learning framework look like for that content over time. But we've moved in really piecemeal, targeted ways that I think has been helpful. And then the other thing I think is we provide a really clear service to the little space that we are in, right? So we are doing the field building work, we're doing the policy work, we're working the state groups, and we don't ever intend to build curriculum. That's not our focus. There's so many folks out there who are doing great work, aiEDU included, right? Who have much more expertise in that arena than we do. we don't plan to go into professional development, at least for teachers. We're focused on PD for district administrators, for state leads, for all the folks who have to make those system level decisions about like student pathway design and what credentials should come where and when and how. And so that focus is pretty specific. And we really believe in not reinventing the wheel. Like the last thing I want to do is start my goal is not to make DS for E like a 100-person or 200-person team with like, $20 million annual budget or something at scale like that. We are trying to work with existing organizations and with existing professional orgs and with the state agencies that already exist, because our strategy is so focused on integration into the existing school subjects. We're not trying to build a new one. Just as you all are not trying to build out a new subject arena.
I mean, so I hear you, and I think we've actually, and I was just talking to a funder today, and I literally echoed something. I didn't give a number in terms of the ceiling of our budget, but the way I described it is the scope of like the challenge that's in front of us is so significant. Like there's our strategy is not to try to build an organization that single-handedly solves all of it, because it would have to be, I think, way more than 100 people. Like I think we're talking like tens of thousands, right? So I think that is. And there are some nonprofits that are at that, maybe not quite 10,000 scale, but like, TFA is about like 4,000 something. I think it's like 2,000. And TFA has like a couple thousand teachers that are actually like in schools right now, and then like a bigger alumni pace. They're like 200 million something in the hundreds of millions. And that's a drop in the bucket. I mean, like one of the districts we work in has 10,000 teachers in just one district. So I think that there's power in that, because it also kind of like plants the flag for like the rest of the ecosystem to like, don't be threatened, because the goal is not to sort of like crowd out the space and like beat the competitors, which is like a stupid paradigm. But here's my other thing is $20 million is a drop in the bucket. Like to me, even if you were to say, I want to stay small, $20 million should not feel like a big number, because what we are dealing with, I mean, a single district that you or I have met with can be at like the $1 billion annual budget level. And so I think that's like another place where in the social impact space, we're like afraid of scale and size, and I think that's because just the, I don't know. I mean, we aren't rewarded for being ambitious, right? There's a fine line to walk. So you're walking it. I guess I would just sort of encourage you, as my team has pushed me, is like, there is still a balance of like we need to push funders a little bit on this, because every single nonprofit doing work in the space could double or triple in size. And I think we would still be barely scratching the surface in terms of like the relative size of like the solution against the problem set that we're dealing with. But point taken. You're not wrong to try to stay below 100. But maybe 50,
You're right that it's the TAM, right? The total addressable market in the K-12 space, especially because we are a decentralized system with 50 states and 13,000 school districts, and tons of intermediate organizations. And at the end of the day, I mean, like teachers and school leaders need more resources. The problem is huge in scale. I think there are the competitive dynamics that folks worry about are way overblown, because of how large the problem is relative to how tiny all of our organizations are, relative to how much work has to get done. With our work at Data Science for Everyone, we're trying to actually promote some friendly competition and create a market for data science and data literacy solutions, right? And curriculum materials, more professional development teams who can come in and help the 13,000 school districts that we have across the country. And we launched recently a curriculum providers network, where we're helping all of the providers that are working on data literacy education or data science curriculum with, here's what we think this state is going to do next. And we see grant opportunities in this particular area, and we think we should be pursuing them right now. Or we think that hey, there's this really exciting NSF solicitation that just came out, and what if we were able to go in together and fundraise, or try to do something jointly. And our team has been trying to promote a little bit of like friendly competition, with that being sort of a ridiculous metaphor, because we're in student enrollment for data science or data literacy programs is around 3% of high school students right now. and
Yeah,
we
I
have
see what you're saying. Like,
97% to reach still, right? Like there's so much room, and there are I think like the myth of competition is pretty significant in the space right now.
yeah, I guess hearing you when you talk about curriculum, it does make sense that that is an area where you want some competition. You don't want any kind of like monopoly, and you certainly, I think there's value that comes from sort of like the productive struggle of like trying to, like create the best possible curriculum, and like having better alternatives pushes organizations to do better. I think there's just I think the power dynamics in the nonprofit world are it's sometimes I think propagated by, maybe I don't even know if it's funders' faults. I think it's actually peer nonprofits making an assumption that their fundraising is mutually exclusive to fundraising
Yes.
by peers.
I think it is that exact norm.
And to me, like there's a few ways that like to break out of that. I mean, one is I think funders can actually break out of that paradigm by not making a decision that we are going to pick just one. But I think it also is dependent on the nonprofits themselves. And I think we've like tried very, very hard to figure out like how can we set up our strategy in a way that like success for us, like almost by definition, means that we're not the only ones out there. And so I think there's actually, you kind of have to create the conditions for funders to be able to fund peers. So I think if you go in and say, we want to be the leading nonprofit that provides all the AI readiness curriculum or all the data science curriculum, then the funders basically has to make a decision. What you've kind of described to me with DS4E is, no, we're actually sort of like movement building and creating, trying to catalyze the ecosystem to do this work. And so success for us, I mean, it's hard to imagine success for DS4E that doesn't result in other nonprofits also benefiting significantly. Like it almost seems antithetical to what you've described. Like you need other nonprofits to thrive by definition, or else you'll have failed.
Yeah,
in your endeavor. And I think that's exactly that's a beautiful setup, because like what you've done is basically said like, as we raise more money, as we grow, our impact will in part be measured by the success and growth of other, whether it's organizations or even like school programs. So I think it's really, I think it's really beautiful, and it's something that other organizations, the more that they kind of like buy into that, the more we'll sort of have created a system where the philanthropic community can kind of come in and figure out, okay, how do we actually build all of this up together? But it does require some like actually being intentional about being friendly, because there is a little bit of, like I think just and it's not bad intention. I think it's just sort of this assumption that, well, I guess we're supposed to be competitors, and sometimes it's because people ask, who are your, I mean, I get this a lot, like, oh, who are your competitors? And people have actually asked me about this with data science for everyone. Like, oh, AI education and data science, there's a lot of overlap there, and there is, but I usually sort of just like wave away the question as like, it's just like the wrong question to ask.
Yeah, no, I think it is the wrong question to ask. And I think, so we just came back from our team retreat a week ago. We had the beginning of the year to have some in-person conversations about strategy and where to be taking the group next. And I said something that kind of freaked my team out. I was like, the most successful version of DS4E is that we go away, we go home, we close up, and we say, we're successful in convincing the field and catalyzing the field to take this new approach in caring about these skill sets for students in the curriculum as part of the standard experience. And predictably, they're like, "What the heck, Zarek? Like, you don't freak us out like that." And because of the scale of the problem, we're not going to shut down tomorrow, right? Like there's so much more work to do. But I also do take seriously that like we want to create systemic impact that ultimately gets integrated in the system. And that is our approach, right? So we want to be building sustainability amongst a number of organizations that are working with districts every year and training teachers every year in the long term. It might be a number of the ed organizations, more of the innovative publishers, researchers, et cetera. It's going to be a lot of the folks that are already there. We're just trying to structure and really amplify all their work so it becomes self-sustaining.
Yeah, because you're not building curriculum. Because if you were building curriculum, then you would want continuity. But if you're successful, there will be this sort of thriving ecosystem and market of amazing high quality data science curriculum providers. and there will be sort of like the systemic demand and capacity to implement that curriculum effectively across schools.
Right. Right.
And
So
they won't need the external support almost by definition.
Right, right. And I think like two things are important. First, before we ever formalized DS for E, the group of us, whether it's a number of the curriculum teams, myself and some of the other folks who are working at Risk with Levitt, some of the researchers were just meeting over Zoom during the pandemic. That created a really trusting community where instead of being outright competitors, everyone's actually been learning from each other, and they've been like, "Oh, I figured this out with this district, this semester, and it was really successful." Or like, "Hey, we're seeing like this trend, and we're kind of worried about it. Like, can we think about a solution to deal with districts being worried about their funding post ESSER?" Right? We talk about that stuff as a group, and it's so helpful. I also think like the notion of our two orgs being competitors is a little ridiculous because, as you now know, right, like our strategy is to bring more organizations and self-sustaining high quality teams into the space. So aiEDU doing well is like a huge success for us, given we're in such so aligned in a mission and trying to help the system adapt to a really fast changing landscape and helping teachers figure out what do students need to learn given the whole landscape is changing. So I think that those notions are fair questions, but I think
It's
pretty quickly resolved.
Well, I mean, let's talk about, I think, like one maybe sort of a different way of sort of like asking about the relevance or, what competition looks like could go something like this. And this is something that we deal with a little bit less because sort of the abstraction of AI readiness is like sort of harder to talk about. But you're talking about data science. I've gotten a lot of questions from folks who are like, well, okay, AI is really good. The questions have been about computer science, but I think they apply to data science. AI is increasingly good at coding and writing code. Should we be spending any time teaching kids to do something that machines are already somewhat competent at, not necessarily amazing, but they're decent enough, certainly better than, a freshman in high school. And by the time those kids graduate, it's probably going to, if you extrapolate the trend line, it's probably going to be extremely competent at coding. Is it even relevant anymore? And I know this is also a legitimate question for data science because, I follow the subreddits, and I mean, there's a lot of people who are PhDs in data science who are talking about how, the O1 model basically complete. This was actually, I have a screenshot of this. It was like O1 basically completed my PhD thesis that took me a year to write in like an hour. And so I guess I'd love to pose that question to you. Like, I mean, how do you think about this? Like, if AI continues to be good, and if we basically do find that, it negates the value of expertise in data science because everybody's going to have a data scientist sort of like at their fingertips. Will you even need to know anything about data science if sort of like that expertise becomes ubiquitous and accessible?
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you're asking this because this is like the part of the conversation I was looking most forward to is like diving into this exact question. So I think there's like a couple levels to this. First, like there's the moving target of like where is AI technology going to go long term, right? And like how good is it going to get at coding? How good is it going to get at writing? How good is it going to become at screen and image recognition that enables autonomous vehicles to scale? And we're already seeing those things implemented like at a really fast rate, right? And I think you have actually a very good pulse on this. Like I see you regularly posting on LinkedIn or other and Substack about what the VCs are investing in and like what they're paying attention to in terms of the next big thing in AI. I'm also like a huge skeptic on the workforce implications of AI impacts, right? So I like. And this maybe just like comes from like Levitt being a skeptic and everything and like my economics background, but we've been through multiple technology revolutions and to a certain extent like a quickening pace over the past couple decades, right? Like the internet, and then personal computing, and then the big data, which I think was really focused in 2010s, and now AI. In terms of these technologies becoming marketed to the public, they've existed for decades, going back to the 50s and 60s. But even if you look back at the Industrial Revolution or other like massive tech changes, it's always created more jobs. And I think some of the best forecasts that I've seen on the impacts of AI on the workforce are less about, oh, this job is going to get replaced or that type of work is going to totally go away. And it's more about task composition within existing careers, right? So I think and McKinsey has great research on this. There's a lot of good econ papers. I think the day-to-day experience of a coder or software engineer or someone working to build technology applications will change quite a bit, but I don't think it's going to go away completely. And then within the job, like, I think you still need to know how to code in order to find the errors that are coming out of AI tools, how to debug the thing that's in front of you. I think the work becomes more efficient, but it doesn't. You still need to, like, it's the perfect sequitur here is mathematics and calculators, right? Like, students learn how to do things on calculators, but we didn't get rid of arithmetic and we didn't get rid of division or multiplication. We still learn those things in elementary school, and it's still important to learn the basics in order to know how the tools work, and in order to know when the tool's giving you the wrong thing, and when you might need to go fix the tool or apply it somewhere else or customize it for the application that you're now in charge of. And I think there are going to be so many of those examples across sectors where it's I think it's still important to have those skills embedded in the curriculum. The question becomes, just like in the workforce, where the time allocation might change, or where the way that you approach the problems might change. So, like, no one's no one's whipping out the graphing calculator on the floor of Google anymore, right? Because we can do those things much faster on personal computers. And same thing with with so many of my friends who now work as software engineers at tech companies. They can get through their day faster. You can apply a rate of improvement to the AI tools long run. But I still think you need the ability to work between the tool and your own knowledge in order to solve whatever problem is in front of you every day. So if you get back to the question about data, I think data has another thing going for it, which is AI tools are trained on high quality data sets. You need to have a pretty deep knowledge of what's going in when you're building a new LLM, or if you're trying to customize one in order to get the result that you want. And I think, like, and that's just like a sliver of the competencies that data science covers in the education context. There's also civic implications that we're really focused on and really are quite passionate about, making sure that students can effectively present arguments that are backed by data, and there's clear logic in how you found your sources and processed what data sets you have access to. And I think also the amount of domain specific knowledge that you need, whether you're working in manufacturing or agriculture, or name your sector, where AI tools might be starting to become more part of your day-to-day experience, you still need to tailor it. And I don't think that piece is going to go away either. And so, like, I hear the claims of, like, oh, maybe we don't need to teach kids to code anymore because AI might be running at the rate of improvement that'll just totally replace the need. And I'm skeptical of the total replacement argument.
I think near term, I mean, that's certainly the case, right? Like, it may be the fact that you don't need to learn specific languages, and, like, it's not, like, the specific language you learn in high school is perhaps less important than the sort of the wraparound skills of, let's say, sort of iterative problem solving, and almost like that baseline familiarity, so that you can sort of, like, look at lines of code and sort of identify where there might have been errors. Although Google is claiming 80% of the code that's written doesn't require any changes from human reviewers, which is kind of wild. And I think fully 25% of the code that's written right now at Google is written by AI.
Well, so then the problem for us, right, is that we have a 12 to 20 year prediction problem, because if you think about what are we, imagine we do a curriculum intervention at scale in Ohio. Let's take as an example. The systemic impact that we generate today for today's kindergartner is going to take at least 12 years to affect when they graduate from high school, and then another 4 years for whatever their post-secondary pathway is. And we have the most impossible job as a system, not just the two of us, but as a K-12 system, to respond to a moving target of what skills and thinking habits and problem solving frameworks every young person across every sector is going to need by the time they graduate 20 years from now. And that is very challenging. And I don't know if the field holistically has woken up to the scale and the complexity of that prediction problem.
Right. Right. It's like, I mean, all bets are off in 10 years. And that is a time scale that we're looking at. And I was talking to someone who I really trust, someone like who's a very early thinker and investor in the future of work. And he was just like, honestly, if anybody tries to tell you what's going to happen in 10 years, what the jobs of the future are, like almost immediately discredit them. Because legitimately, everybody who's really paying attention to this does not know. And David Autor is like one of the economists that I'm always talking about because I just think he is an incredibly thoughtful take on sort of this conversation about expertise and jobs. And even, I've watched a bunch of his lectures where there's a Q&A section, people try to press him to like kind of like articulate like, what does this actually look like? What are the jobs that get replaced? And he really demurs. He doesn't give a concrete answer. And I think that's, it's easy for us to gravitate towards like a really pithy, easy sort of like a soundbitey response to that. But those seem most obviously the most probable wrong predictions are the ones where we're like overly specific. So yeah, we don't know, but I mean, it seems
well. But I also think like humans are like famously horrible predicting things, right? Like we suck at predicting the future as a species, and like the behavioral econ research just shows this again and again. Like we're very bad at predictions, and so I think with that framework, then what I look to is go much longer on your time scale, right? Like literally look at the industrial revolution and look at the impact of the space race and look at the impact of the internet's introduction. That is the time scale at which the K-12 system should be thinking about, not like the year-to-year changes of OpenAI's next GPT model, right? Like that's not going to be helpful for us. And when I look at that time scale and you apply like the creative destruction framework, it's reliably the case that new technologies always create new types of jobs, and the rate of automation is always slower than people predict it will be in the freak out moment when people are responding to the new tool. So that's a bit of a solace. And then I think also on the longer time scale, you can find things that'll be pretty reliably permanent. And I think like students knowing how to use technology devices and being able to adapt to the next tool over time, that's a permanent idea. We're going to continue to have tools that we have to jump between. And so I'm very invested in thinking about how both of our work can support students jumping between, adapting to new tools. And I think I think data is going to be permanent. We're still going to need data on a variety of problems 20 years from now and be able to work with it articulately and be able to extract meaning from it, regardless of what the tool is that's interacting with it. And that I'm also pretty confident in. Like the exact like software move that I use to merge two data sets with a CSV file. Who knows what's going to happen with we might develop a crazy great solution that automates that someday. But I think building the intuition to transfer and practice those computational moves will be super important.
Yeah, I studied history in college, and I've been kind of obsessing about sort of like the historical look at industrial revolution and sort of like past the way automation's played out in the past. I mean, the first thing I'll say is like past performance is not an indicator of what's going to happen in the future, and so it's not. And I think I'm quoting Autor again. It's not a rule that automation has to play out in a way that is slow enough to allow a society to adapt. So that's A. B, I think actually if you look at past industrial revolutions, yes, it's the case that like more jobs are created than destroyed. So the net outcome from automation has been generally really good. But it isn't necessarily always good for everybody who gets those jobs. And like I think about, I've been obsessing a lot about sort of seamstresses who were, replaced by the loom and then the steam engine and steam factories. And, yes, they got new jobs, but they were working in like dark, windowless, smoke-filled factories. And it doesn't necessarily give me, I don't get that much comfort from the idea that, well, everybody's going to be employed in some way, because I think actually the question is like, how do we make sure the kids are actually able to command some kind of economic value from the skill sets that they have? And I think that's what brings me back to both computer science, data science, mathematics, rhetoric and the humanities. I mean, I think if like if all else is equal and everybody has access to the same AI tools, then the differentiating factor will be how much expertise you can add on top of that. And yes, we don't know exactly in what form that's going to look like, right? But I completely agree with you in the sense that the whatever the digital divide looks like, the kids who are on the right side of that are kids who are probably going to have done a ton of stuff that goes way beyond prompt engineering, and they're going to and yes, because AI is like fundamentally data science. It seems quite obvious to me that like understanding sort of like the bones of this technology and like how it works and being able to actually talk sort of meaningfully and thoughtfully about biased data sets, because that's like a buzzword now, algorithmic bias. But at the end of the day, like what that really is data science. It's like actually like being able to talk about like what is the data that went into these models, how is it weighted, and how do you look at the outputs and sort of like think critically about that. You can get kind of far by just using AI ethics as like a lens and like sort of like social studies as a lens. But at a certain point, to get to any level of depth and sort of building like a thoughtful perspective on that, you kind of have to understand how data works. Computer science is like slightly, I think it's like in that same vein, but it's like a little bit. I'm less convinced about data science than that like every single student is gonna absolutely need to have. I think right now it's like 5% of kids in the U.S. are in an introductory computer science class. I have no idea what the number is for data science.
We're around 3%. Yeah, 3%. We actually just collated our first estimates. And so yeah, a couple important things that I think you brought up, like just first on the automation effects, right? Like I think that is what does add urgency to our work, is it's the transition of jobs or who is competitive entering the marketplace is going to be super varied by community, by how fast we were able to help our curriculum change and help our students get ready for that. And like we need to talk about both of our concurrent Ohio roots, right? Because like I saw that gap within my own family in a huge way, and I think that like is a part of what continues to motivate me. And then on the like, what skill does every student need? We are really invested in making sure every student graduates data literate, which is different than taking
setting the bar low.
Different than taking that advanced high school course in data science techniques for how to merge a data set or how to, do other technical moves that are going to set you up really well for today's job market and will help you transfer later on. But being realistic, like not every student is going to take that elective course, right? And so we know that we need to do some deeper integration work in the core subjects in order to make sure that every student gets a flavor of this before they graduate. And I think that is the universal thing that we're really invested in to make sure we mitigate digital divide that is only going to exponentially compound the more dramatic that the AI cycle grows.
And setting the low bar is not that wasn't meant to that wasn't meant to be deprecating. It's I think it's actually really important to do work to reach the kids who are at the back of the line, kids in low funded schools, kids in rural schools that don't have any honors tracks, and many schools that don't even have a computer science teacher, let alone a teacher that's figuring out how to integrate data science. You have to set the bar low, because right now the bar is at 0. And I think no matter how amazing it would be if every student did go through some sort of like AP or honors data science class, like if you set the bar too high, it will scare away a lot of schools where it's just overwhelming for them. And like the more you sort of create some like really tangible, easy ways, and that's like totally the thesis of our curricular thesis is like stepping stones, and giving teachers like easy ways to dip their toes in the water, and then sure, they can sort of graduate. Gwinnett County, I don't know if you've talked to the folks at Gwinnett County Public Schools, but they have this metaphor, swim, snorkel, scuba, and this is a reference to AI literacy, but it's like, some kids, everybody needs to learn how to swim. A smaller group of kids will go on and snorkel, and an even smaller group will go on and scuba dive. And I think that could apply to computer science. I think it can apply to data science, where it's like, everybody should know how to swim. Like that seems sort of unequivocal. And especially in today's world where kids are talking about the algorithm, they're talking about, like they know that their life is being shaped by these models, but they don't really know what the algorithm is, right? They sort of like have this colloquialism, and I think there's a lot of power just giving them some sort of fidelity around like what that actually means and like how they can start to make, if not make informed decisions for themselves, at least understand the world around them and understand why things are happening. Because I think there's a lot of um, it can be a very scary place when it feels like sort of you don't have control over these technologies that are increasingly becoming like, fundamental to the way that we communicate and live. It feels kind of silly to say that now, but I mean, were you in, when did Facebook come out for you? Like, do you remember when you joined Facebook?
Well, but before I answer that revealing question, I was going to go back to something you said on the whether we're lowering the bar or not, because I when you say that, I take you to mean not there differentiated between the level of challenge, or like teachers don't like using the term rigor, right? But like the level of rigor or challenge or depth of the content versus the dosage. And I think the strategic misstep is, I think, the system has done so much over the past 20 years to build out computer science education as a new school subject, right? And I think we need to actually continue making those investments, because that's 20 years of human capital development and teacher training and people in school buildings who have pushed really hard for technology education that we need to continue to invest in. And I think the strategic missteps that I'm increasingly observing that CS made as a movement was over-investing in the students who are going to become CS graduates at bachelor's programs to then go work for a technology company, and under-investing in the, I want to call it like the mid-level, this is the classic like computational thinking, computational literacy versus computer science, versus CS debate, right? And I think they underinvested in the literacy side of the spectrum from some of the field building work that was done. And I think that meant that there was an underinvestment in cross-subject integration, which meant that we have students who are still graduating with identities where they don't identify themselves as a person who's tech savvy or who is good at math or able to access STEM, right? And that is a perpetuating cycle. And I think that's a huge challenge that we need to continue to fight and really make some huge progress against over the next like 5 years, or with some real urgency. What was the question you asked about?
My question was, just trying to like, because how old are you?
This is a classified question that I've only revealed to 2 people on my team for
really. I don't know if my team
have drawn it out of me over time. But no,
okay, so don't answer the question.
No,
Why don't you answer
I'm 27.
You're 27. Okay. So how old were you when you had, like, when did Facebook come into your life? Like, I'm using Facebook as sort of like that, like, barometer of like when social media kind of blew up. I mean, MySpace was actually a little bit before my time. I assume you weren't on MySpace.
I never made it to MySpace. I was an earlier adopter of Facebook, though. I got a Facebook account in middle school.
Okay. Which was like 07 or something.
Yeah. That seems right. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Like so you still have like some memory of what it was like growing up before there was any social media.
Yeah. A little bit. Yeah. Tiny amount. And few of my classmates had it. My parents were a little bit more permissive in terms of my online access.
Interesting. Do you think that had anything to do with your, like, did that help to feed your curiosities and help you nerd out, or was it?
Honestly, and like it's weird
for the parents out there who are wondering, like, should I be,
did that ruin me as a child?
Yeah.
I like, so today I don't actually spend that much time on social, and like the part of my day where I like go in LinkedIn and like give a status update about our work is like my least favorite part of the day, because I just hate posting on socials. And I was on it early, but I think because it didn't feel like something that was prohibited to me, I didn't make a big deal about it. It's similar to like, but my parents took a similar approach to like alcohol. Like they would regularly let me like drink wine with dinner. And then I never felt like there was some sort of like yearning for it. And then in college, right? So I do worry about that. I worry about the bans and the prohibitions around social actually backfiring in with that mechanism in mind. I don't have an opinion about the overall policy, but like that's just something to consider. Now, as a the effect on my like dispositions or daily life, like again, like I don't think I generalize super well because I was a super nerdy kid. So I was not like using social media as a determiner of my like social worth or identity with my friends. To be fair, was not at that level of importance yet when it was first, like when I got first access to it initially, and my peers. Like it was, in-person socializing was still de facto the mode, and it was an add-on that was a fun activity or a hobby to do on the side.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was like the end all be all, which it is, I think, in many ways now for young people.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious. I don't even know anymore whether social media, because I think the paradigm was early on, social media would be sort of this indicator of social worth based on how many likes you had. But I actually think the paradigm of like likes is sort of gone. I think most of the usage of social media right now is sort of like this kind of like mindless brain rot scrolling
That's
where
super.
where
Yeah,
you're not really like it's interesting because at least before there was a sense of like, okay, you're sort of like, it's generative, like you're creating something, you're creating posts, you're sort of like telling a story about yourself, and there's obviously like ways that that's really bad for your mental health, but nonetheless it was like in some ways almost a creative outlet. And there's obviously some small subset of kids who are creating content, but my sense is that like when most people think about social media use today, they are scrolling and they're doing this, and it can sort of like, you can spend like 2 hours sort of just going through. And my latest one, I use Instagram because I like chat with friends, and my feed is, I think because I have this like the curiosity about like all the weird corners of Instagram, I get like really really weird stuff. And like the latest one was this influencer with like literally hundreds of thousands of followers that like steps into like macaroni and cheese and like different pastas. And it's just sort of this like ASMR, I guess, of like feet and pasta. And maybe there's some sort of like sexual undertones in that. I don't really know. But it's like, I look at that and it really, it scares the hell out of me because it's like, I don't understand it. And if I don't understand it, how the hell is some kid supposed to make sense of this? And yet they're sort of like almost like, I think certainly if they don't understand how this all works, then it can almost feel like you are a slave to sort of like whatever the algorithm sort of like spits out at you. And one of our activities is actually like, how do you train the algorithm? Or it was, I don't know if it is actually still on our website anymore. I think we might have taken it down because we're moving away from like direct to student content. Yeah. But when we had some direct to student content on our website, there was this activity that was like, challenging kids to try to train their TikTok algorithm to feed like certain types of content that they wouldn't normally. So like owls or, badgers or things like that. And the goal being to help students understand like the different levers they have when they're actually engaging in content, like when they comment on something or share something, like those are all going to perpetuate more content like that. And so while it might feel like I'm getting all this weird sort of like pasta content with feet, it's probably because I'm sending it to my friends, and I know this is the case. I'm sending it to my friends like, look at how crazy this is. And my friends are commenting. And so the Instagram is like, oh, Alex likes this really crazy stuff. And my ads also are really sort of like off the deep end.
Are they pasta and feet themed now?
No, I got water fountains for a while, like literally like industrial water fountains, like as if like I was like looking to install it.
Yeah. Good kitchen edition or something.
Yeah, I mean, but data science to me is, it's like an abstraction that maybe it's hard for a teacher to intuitively figure out how to have that conversation and like sort of like excite students and connect the dots. But I feel like that's a really powerful opportunity in front of us. Is like social media is crazy, the world is crazy. Data science actually is a way of understanding why some of this stuff is like playing out, and it also gives you like a little bit of a shield because you can contextualize like when something's happening to you, like what you have agency, what you don't. But I'm in it. You're really deep in this. Like how easy or hard have you seen teachers kind of like connecting the dots? To simplify my question, do you feel like teachers generally understand or really need help conveying the relevance of data science to kids who are not naturally inquisitive and like, let's say, math curious or like really excited about math? I'm sure those kids, and you were probably one of them, they didn't have to actually work that hard to get them excited. But for most kids, myself, I would have been one of these. Do teachers kind of figure this out, or is that one of the areas where you feel like they need help?
Yeah. You raise a good point, and I have a story and then a tweak of your argument. So the story is, I worked in the administration for a year, and I worked at U.S. Department of Ed, and I was there as a fellow researching emerging tech. And I remember having this conversation with one of the program officers who runs Gear Up. She had this great advice, and she was like, "This sounds fun, or well, this sounds important. I can tell you're excited about this topic area. There's a huge risk that this could be boring, and you better gosh darn make sure it's fun for kids, or else you're not going to get anyone to, you're not going to get any traction, and it's not going to sustain itself." And I think that's totally right about data science, AI, computer science, cybersecurity, like all of the emerging technology areas that seem a little bit esoteric. And so we've been really focused on how to capture that. Now, the part where I'm going to tweak your argument, or just tweak the framing a little bit. Our team is obviously super invested in the importance of like data literacy for all students and creating introductory data science experiences. I personally, and I honestly, I think our team is even more invested in making sure that the student experience in our core subjects like mathematics or science or English is really relevant and engaging to kids. And we see data science or data literacy education as a vehicle to help modernize some of those experiences for students, rather than relevant math becomes before data science for our team. And we think it's actually a way to teach math or teach social studies more engaging, pick up some tech literacy skills, get some technical software experience. And what we're really excited about is with data science, the data science education approach in particular, is it is so easy for a teacher to make a lesson plan customized to student experiences through swapping in and out the data sets, right? Because what happens when a teacher is trying to teach exponents or polynomials or a linear model math, or they're trying to get their students through memorizing a set of battles in history class. Mm-hmm. Often go to the textbook, lecture, do rote procedures, right? What if instead you surveyed your students, asked them what they saw in the news last week, go find a data set on NBA scores or from the game recently, or you found whatever's trending on Spotify, threw them a data set, and then had them, and it obviously has to be structured in a way that gets you to that concept, but you're able to create an engagement strategy with students by customizing the content that they're working with, and the concepts that they're applying on that is the fixed learning goal that's already in your standards. And that's what we're really excited about. One of our upcoming projects is going to be to build a data set hub of personalized, really exciting topics that are relevant to like today's teens, right? So we're going to try to get, there's already a way to get Spotify data through an API and just report it into Google Sheets. A lot of teachers
I would love to. I mean, personally, right? I would love to get my hands on that. That'd be so fun.
And so many students already have access to the G Suite and to Google accounts. And it's not, not every district, but many can access Google Sheets. You could repeat that approach through a classroom-specific software, and you preload a call to MBA scores, or whatever is trending on Pinterest, and you can create custom projects that are really relevant for students, where they can chart their own path in the project that they're given, as long as they are still learning how exponents work. And that is the vision of how we think the integrated approach for this might look like long term. And we think the possibilities for getting student engagement up, getting them to see why technology skills and information literacy and be able to retrieve stuff on the internet is super easy and feasible for them to do, connected with the formal concepts that they often don't see come alive in the same way. So that the approach is slightly different, right? Like, we're excited about like students learning the theoretical approach of data science, or how algorithmic bias is really a result of skewed data that you put into a training model, and having that theoretical lens. We also want to see that engagement and customization come to reality.
It's I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I do sort of, I think what we have run into is like, that vision is really compelling. Some teachers totally get it, and all they need is just the resources at their fingertips, and maybe a little bit of like a shove out the door, to use the Lord of the Rings analogy, or or actually a Hobbit. But I think there's other teachers that like what you're describing is still feels insurmountable. Like they wouldn't know what to do with the data set. And, for teachers, they're sort of, I think the expectation or their belief is that they need to sort of be the experts in the classroom. And so if they don't have mastery over something, they really lack the confidence and are hesitant to implement it. And so I'm curious, like how hard is it to get a teacher, like especially let's say social studies, where they're not math people, not all, but let's say like many of them, right? Like specifically went into the humanities because they didn't like math, and like how hard is it to get them to a place where they sort of have the comfort level to be able to like figure out, oh, like this is how I could use a Pinterest or a Spotify data set and connect it to the standards that I have to teach.
So I think this is why we need to build off the shelf curriculum solutions in a decentralized way that connects to this ability, right? And this is like another example of like DS4E being an intermediary organization where we're trying to build an ecosystem or of an approach rather than like doing the direct content work ourselves. And we're building of a community of organizations who can do that work to make it easy to run off the shelf. So you can grab a lesson plan that's connected to your standard that you have to teach 2 weeks from now. And then you can slot in a recent, up-to-date data set or activity that connects to that idea, but it's already pre-programmed to slot into the classroom experience, right? That's what we want to get to. And I think that's actually possible. Like, I think we're not that far away from having that reality. And like this is going to be differentiated by school subject. I think that's the other big thing that we're super focused on is not creating the same solution for every school subject area. The social studies experience, the dispositions and the thinking habits that you learn in that context and what that teacher is confident in covering and is really excited to impart to their kids, super different than what the math teacher is focusing on that week, right? And so we're in this process of building national learning progressions for K-12 data science and data literacy, and we're building them pretty granularly by grade span. We're building the pure version first, where it's subject neutral. We're just thinking about data science and data literacy in a vacuum, but that's not the end of it. We're over the next the second stage of the project, which we're going to kick off in the second half of this year, is then building subject aligned versions. So there's going to be a math version for data science and data literacy, a social studies version, a science version that will solve that challenge of, oh, well, okay, this is all fun and great and seems a little bit complicated, but like I have to teach mitosis, for the next 3 weeks. Like, what am I going to do? We want to make that tailored to each of the subject areas and their approaches rather than trying to make a one size fit all.
Yeah, this is like so similar to our approach. I think we're a little bit less. I don't think we've actually thought through what like the marketplace of AI readiness curriculum looks like, because it's almost it's a bit more of an abstraction where there's like less clear goalposts, and so I feel like we have been working a little bit more on the front end to kind of like define what it even looks like. But I think we've also landed in a similar place where our goal is not to provide the end-to-end solution for AI readiness. And going back to this idea of like not trying to be the one organization, right? Like our curriculum will be sort of exemplar for teachers to use as a reference and to get them started. And I guess that's where like a little bit of competitiveness makes sense. Like you actually want some curriculum to sort of be surmounted by others because it's actually more engaging, and like you want to have a system such that there's actually ways for like better curriculum that has like better outcomes to sort of like rise to the top. I'd be really interested in the platform that you're building, because it seems like a really powerful way to get this thing going. And I get, you were going to say something.
Well, do you want to hear my crazy idea?
Yeah.
Yes. So this is the first time I'm sharing it. So you get to be the first, and then whoever's made it to this point in the episode can also listen. Because he mentioned this idea of like AI literacy not having there's not a large marketplace, right? Like in some ways, like you all are one of the primary, and there's a few other curriculum development projects out there, but it's really early days, and it's just like reflecting in just where the landscape is right now and all the competing demands on the curriculum. I think there needs to be some sort of like confederation between a lot of the modern literacies that have emerged as part of the toolkit for students to graduate from high school that combines data literacy AI literacy and the computational literacy or computational thinking, but then also media literacy and financial literacy and civics literacy or civics education. And I think like that confederation of sort of like practical everyday skills, those movements have been operating separately from each other in silos and in some ways competing with the school schedule, right? Because the financial literacy folks come in and say, oh, you should teach financial algebra. And then data science comes in and says, oh, no, you should be doing more stats modeling and the other thing in the third year of high school. Those are super related, general realms of shifting focus a little bit towards more application and practical skills and thinking frameworks rather than the very theory and procedure-based curriculum that we generally have and knowledge-based curriculum that we currently have. And it's not a complete replacement because both of our orgs are really focused on integration at small to medium dosages. We're not trying to build a whole new school subject area. And I think all of those movements are generally aligned on this idea of given where the world has moved, the curriculum at large has not kept pace with some of the larger shifts that we've seen. And there needs to be a redialing of time allocation within the curriculum. And so I don't know how that works at the operational level. And I think a lot of it might start actually with like joint advocacy work and probably comes is most important at the state level when you're working with state level leaders who are writing state standards. But I think there's other manifestations of that could grow over time.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think AI literacy, and we think about it more as AI readiness, which is sort of like AI literacy plus sort of critical thinking skills. And that's where, I think our curriculum really neatly fits alongside computer science and data science, in part because when we talk about AI readiness, we're talking about like critical thinking skills, which are, and like, iterative and creative problem solving, which are actually really effectively built via data science and computer science education. And so to me, that's a shoe-in. I have a wondering about this because I think there's a danger in trying to go too big too fast, and this sort of like
for sure.
to our earlier point about sort of like baby steps and like making it as easy as possible for schools to opt in. I think the more that this becomes sort of like this wholesale reimagining of school, it's like we need to get there. And so I just have this, I have an anxiety about if the goal is to sort of like reach as many students as quickly as possible, perhaps there is danger in like thinking too big and too ambitiously. And yet it seems so obvious, right? It's like financial literacy and data literacy seem extremely connected. Civics education and AI literacy and AI readiness are extremely connected. And arguably, like maybe that's one of the most important areas for schools to be honing in. I just don't know if schools have a demand at all for civics education right now. And so there's like almost a risk of like, we had this sort of AI zeitgeist moment. I think data science benefits from that. I just don't know if like this becomes sort of like, do you want to shoehorn everybody in and try to bandwagon it into schools? And at some point, will they just be like, whoa, like this is they always have like bad experience. I need to do more research into civics education. That's probably my next, if you have any recommendations for any papers on this. Because it's kind of like it wildly failed. I mean, like the amount of schools that have taught civics has like decreased significantly. And that's despite people sort of like increasingly talking about how important this is and how relevant, civics is to day to day. I think we're going to cut this part anyway. So let's go back to, no, I think it's a really admirable idea. I think in the spirit of baby steps, data science, computer science, and AI literacy seem like the obvious places to start. And I think what I'm hearing from you is also that none of this actually has to happen at the expense of some of these other sort of like fundamental parts of like operating in society, not just as like a worker, but as like a citizen, as a consumer. Most people will agree that we need to have these things. And so, I guess is your point, like take this as an opportunity to kind of like seize the momentum that the AI revolution has sort of created, where people are ready to actually talk again about reimagining school, when I think 3 years ago, they're like literally they had thrown their arms up in the air. And this was like, during COVID, right? People were like, COVID was almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, and there was just like no interest anymore in sort of like dealing with any of this other big sort of big thinking stuff. But now people are having those conversations again.
Yeah, and I think that, and I'm all for leveraging like the AI, the AI hype investment cycle that technology community's in, right? And I think we both need to be both of these movements, these ideas, and all those practical, high school toolkit skills need to be leveraging the attention on AI as a technology to get overdue ideas into the curriculum, including literacy AI, because we know that's going to be a 20-year thing that we can count on, that it's not going to go away. And so I think it's a huge opportunity for the whole space to be thinking about. And totally hear you on going too big too fast with this 5 literacies confederation idea. I think it has to start in baby steps. And I think it can start in baby steps in a few specific areas. And I actually think you named one of them, which is learning about prior movements and prior field building and prior just education, reform efforts jointly, rather than doing it in silos. Like my team's been doing this recently. Like we've been looking at like other organizations or prior movements and trying to see like what we can learn from them. It'd be good to do that in conversation, right? Like we shouldn't be doing that in isolation.
Are you going to publish any of your? Is this sort of like internal research?
They're like lunch and learns that we like do on like Google Slides. Like it's not not at an academic level. It's at a super practical level for like building an org strategy for or a roadmap for a year, or setting OKRs or like those types of things. And I also think that there are some opportunities when we go to a state standards process, and the Department of Ed is looking at doing standards revision across 3 subjects. That should be a collaborative project where everyone is able to see their framework getting integrated into the space they think it makes most sense at the same time. And I think that would help district leaders then respond to, because what's happening in the status quo is that all these different things are coming in piecemeal at different times.
Yes.
One district administrator gets excited about one topic, and then that person leaves, and another one comes in and it switches. Or the math person is working on data science, and the CS person is working on AI literacy, and the social studies coordinator is looking at technology ethics, and it's happening in isolation because of the way that the curriculum is siloed. And so I think that's where there are opportunities to in pilot scale, right, to think about like some coordination. But hard to do when all of our teams are small nonprofits that are bandwidth constrained. So there's also like that reality that I think makes it tricky in practice.
So for anybody who's managed to get this far along in the conversation, my guess is that they are pretty motivated by the work that you're doing, and they might be asking themselves like, what can I do? And maybe they're even thinking about like, oh, I want to try my hand at creating some curriculum. Like, what is the action that someone can take to plug into your movement? And maybe you can share for different personas, like whether it's a teacher, administrator, or like some of these different folks, like where do they start?
So if you're a teacher, you should definitely check out our resource hub. That's the easiest on ramp, right? We have a library of online lesson plans and curriculum resources everywhere from like.
Do we point? I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe it's here.
Give you the
or
website
here, or here. I don't know.
From a lesson plan to like a whole high school course, right? Like the whole spectrum is there.
What grade bands?
All grade bands.
Wow,
so we have K5. Well, we have K5, middle school, high school, and we're going to get more granular over time. If you want to get more nerdy and you have some extra time on your hands, which is like that's already a pretty small set of folks in the education space, but we're going to release the draft learning progressions. We're targeting this summer for the full public release, and there'll be a few feedback rounds leading up to that. We want folks to suggest amendments, and we're going to have a process where either every 1 or 2 years, the national learning progression that we create for all between K2 to 9-10 gets updated as new education research emerges, and as technology changes, and as some of the tools change. And so our idea is to create an adaptive version of standards rather than have it be updated every 7 to 10 years, which is the typical state cycle, so that the exemplar for all the states and districts to draw on at least is always up to date. And we also want to make this the point at which there's really clear research to practice translation. So we're going to be incorporating both teacher anecdotal evidence of real classroom experiences and also like published academic research, and have those two be the justification for like an amendment that anyone could propose, as long as it's
like data driven. Of course,
Thank
data
you.
science for everyone.
You got
probably
the fun.
needs.
You got the fun.
Excellent. Well, Zarek, I mean, I am excited to actually dive into. I mean, especially let me know when the Spotify data set is available, because I literally, like with my friends, we've talked about this, like how we would love to get behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't realize how easy it was, or potentially soon to be easy it will be. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's very cool to have you. You're like 5 blocks away from me, which is exciting. So I'm excited for more walk and talks, and maybe even having you back here. And yeah, guest number like 3, maybe.
Oh my gosh, honored.
Yeah, we have, I think as of now, 3 followers. So it's going to be a huge,
Whoa,
we're going to make some waves.
Yep. Got to roll out the red carpets. But seriously, thank you for inviting me into this. I'm truly honored to be one of the first as you build out this series. And I think it's important, right? Like, I think it's important that the field, has deeper conversations like this, like you said, in longer form, because we covered so much ground. I was able to share like 3 crazy ideas that I've been trying to tell you about for a bit. And now we got to do it in this format. And I think talk about it in a super reflective way. And I hope we have more opportunities to do this. So this is great.
And also, I would love for ideas from you and maybe any one of our 3 followers to, if there are other folks we should be talking to that, especially teachers, especially folks that have actually gotten their hands dirty, rolled up their sleeves. I increasingly think it's going to be important for those folks to get a spotlight, because at a certain point you're just sort of like talking amongst yourselves, and so it's a very small, again, like arcane community of social impact nonprofits in the education space. Like I think if we were all in one gymnasium, it'd be like a couple of 100 people. Probably bigger than that, but not that much bigger. Maybe just go to ASU GSV. Anyways, Zarek, such a pleasure, and hopefully have you back on very soon.